The threat of nuclear war has been a looming specter since the first detonation of a nuclear weapon in 1945. Over the decades, the world has come perilously close to an all-out nuclear war on several occasions, with tense standoffs and near misses that serve as a sobering reminder of the destructive power of these weapons. In this video, we'll explore some of these moments in history and examine why they brought us so close to the brink of disaster. One of the earliest and most well-known examples of nuclear brinkmanship occurred during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. At the time, the United States and the Soviet Union were in the midst of the Cold War, with each country stockpiling nuclear weapons and vying for global dominance. The crisis began when the USSR installed missiles in Cuba, which posed a direct threat to the US mainland. For 13 days, the world watched as President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev engaged in a tense standoff. Kennedy demanded that the missiles be removed, while Khrushchev insisted that they were necessary for Soviet security. Both sides prepared for war, with the US imposing a naval blockade on Cuba and the Soviet Union threatening to respond with force. The standoff reached its climax on October 27, when a US reconnaissance plane was shot down over Cuba. In response, the US Navy began dropping depth charges on Soviet submarines in the area, hoping to force them to surface. Unbeknownst to the US, one of the submarines had brought a nuclear torpedo with it, and the captain was authorized to use it if he felt his vessel was under attack. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed, and the captain chose not to launch the torpedo. Kennedy and Khrushchev ultimately reached a deal, with the USSR agreeing to remove the missiles in exchange for a US pledge not to invade Cuba and a secret promise to remove American missiles from Turkey. The Cuban Missile Crisis is often cited as the closest we've come to nuclear war, and it's easy to see why. Had the US and Soviet Union engaged in a full-blown military conflict, the results would have been catastrophic. Tens of millions of people could have been killed or injured, and the environmental consequences of a nuclear detonation would have been disastrous. Another moment of nuclear brinkmanship occurred in 1973, during the Yom Kippur War between Israel and several Arab states. The USSR, which supported the Arab states, threatened to intervene directly if Israel continued to make gains in the conflict. In response, the US placed its military on high alert, preparing for a possible nuclear war. Neither side took action, however, and the crisis eventually subsided. More recently, tensions between the US and North Korea have raised concerns about a potential nuclear conflict. In 2017, North Korea tested multiple intercontinental ballistic missiles that appeared capable of reaching the US mainland. President Donald Trump responded with bellicose rhetoric, threatening to totally destroy North Korea if it continued to threaten the US. Thankfully, a conflict was averted, and North Korea has since opened diplomatic channels with the US and South Korea. But the threat of a nuclear exchange between the two countries remains a concern, especially given North Korea's continued pursuit of nuclear weapons and its stated willingness to use them if necessary. So why has the world come so close to all-out nuclear war on multiple occasions? One major factor is the inherent danger of these weapons themselves. Nuclear weapons are so destructive that even a limited exchange could have devastating consequences. And because they're designed to be used in a second strike capability, both sides know that any conflict could quickly escalate out of control. Another factor is the nature of international relations. Countries are often competing for resources, power, and influence, and strategic interests can clash in unpredictable ways. When two or more countries have nuclear weapons, they may feel compelled to posture and threaten each other in order to maintain their perceived strength and deter aggression. Luckily, the world has so far managed to avoid a catastrophic nuclear conflict. But as the weapons themselves become more sophisticated and more countries acquire them, the risk remains high. It's up to diplomats, military officials, and everyday citizens to remain vigilant and work toward a world where nuclear war is no longer a threat.